So welcome everybody. This is the gallery at Monterey Peninsula College, and we have been here for 30 years showing mostly exhibits of contemporary art. Today we are thrilled to introduce to you our artist Glenn Carter, who's currently exhibiting in the gallery. And Glenn, you've achieved the honor of having an exhibit here for longer than anyone ever has in our 30-year history. Congratulations. And just so everyone knows, the exhibit will be here indefinitely until it's safe for us to reopen again, when it's safe to be on campus again. We'll see in just a minute as we enter the gallery Glenn's beautiful exhibit, which he installed in March of this year. But I've known Glenn for more than 30 years, and he's always made powerful and intriguing art. And I'm happy to introduce him today and to hear his thoughts about his process and his life as an artist. Welcome, Glenn. So, Glenn, so great to have you here at the gallery again. So tell us, who introduced you to art? Tell us a little bit about your art background.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks for having me and also allowing me to exhibit indefinitely. So my introduction to art was on my father's shoulders when I was probably 2 or 3, going up the Mist Trail, the final ascent to Vernal Falls in Yosemite. And I was struck by the power of the sound, the light, the motion, and the contrast of the earth, the stone faces against the water. And that kind of set the tempo for my voice and attention to the mystery.
Beautiful. I can see that image of a waterfall still in some of your pieces today.
Yeah, it's important for me.
Yeah. So, along that line, what inspires you? Where do your ideas come from?
No, so mostly from the land, the natural world, light, sound, physical reality. And
tell us a little bit more about that. Why is transformation important to you? Finding beauty in the ordinary and transforming it.
Well, I'm interested in cycles of the seasons, cycles within the natural world, the cycles of life, and the objects typically that I use are found, and so they've already gone through process in the physical world. So I'm essentially working in relationship with the object to reanimate it in a new context or a different context than it's been.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more. You've talked to me over the years about your sense of the sacred, about what you call the great mystery.
Yeah, so my interpretation of that is the underlying depth of spirit, again, within the natural world and all the beings and matter within the natural world, and then the power of the dynamics of wind, light, water, fire. That to me is sacred.
Yeah.
I was raised in what I call the Catholic theater, which was imbued with this huge ritual, particularly before 1965 when it was all Latin, and a massive amount of drama, and that had a strong influence on my work. You can see that if you're aware of what those rituals and theater's like.
Yeah, I've been in enough masses that I understand that connection with your work. Yeah. So I'm curious, how do you decide on what kind of piece you want to create? Does finding an object launch that process? Or?
That's pretty accurate. Yeah, typically I find things. I collect things. I store things, and a particular object will. I'll set it up, and it kind of prompts a response So I'll initiate that process, and then the relationship between myself, the object, and the process leads the way. So the material, it's really about the material. Any narrative or assumed narrative that I acquire really happens towards the end of the whole process of making the piece. And then the completion is really when the spectator views the work, because then they bring their perception, their memories, their experiences to it, and it gets reinterpreted and really reanimated in my mind, because the work's ambiguous enough that it can be defined in several ways.
Sure. Oh, that's a wonderful concept, that the piece itself isn't complete until a viewer sees it and brings their own experience to it, their own perceptive ideas to it.
Yeah, that's right. That was Duchamp was kind of big on that whole concept of viewership.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So that's something I'll definitely share with our eventual visitors in the exhibit. So what I've observed about you over the last few decades is that you have this incredible work ethic. Tell us how you developed that and what it's like, what it means to you now, the dailiness, the dogged devotion to your work.
Okay, so I would say it's the discipline aspect of it, and the interest in art started when I was in Catholic school. I was very social, so they had to redirect my energy, and I wound up having to do what was called extra credit work. So I would wake up very early before school and do this work and do drawings of maps and anatomy, geography, whatnot related to school, and that I think set the tone for my working tone. I refer to it now as I have a passion, there's compulsion, and there's productivity. And kind of those three, PCP, those three motivate my work. And it's just, I'm just driven to work and produce. And it's also inspiration. Right? I'm inspired. I'm inspired to work. There's a love of the work.
Of course. So IPCP, so inspiration, passion, compulsion, and productivity.
Yeah.
It's what drives every great artist, for sure. As we conclude our conversation here, it won't end. We're going to go inside the gallery and take a deeper look at your beautiful exhibit inside.
Thanks. Look forward to it.
So here we are with Glenn Carter in his current exhibit at the Monterey Peninsula College Art Gallery. It's called Compelled to Shimmer, Volume 2, The Narrative. Just a month before this show began, there was another body of work that Glenn installed at the Monterey Museum of Art nearby in downtown Monterey. That was the first volume, so Compelled to Shimmer, Volume 1, The Contemplative.
That's right.
When Glenn brought us these beautiful pieces for the gallery, he also brought us a poem that he wrote as a companion to the exhibit. As water in the light, as leaves dropping across shadow, as mist on stone, as beings in motion, so to all are we compelled to shimmer. So as an introduction to this space and your work, Glenn, we have this elegant piece called A Caged Landscape. And what are your thoughts on that?
So this piece assembled itself over a period of time, starting with the background paper sumi piece, Sans the Photo. And I did that about 10 years ago, and it was kicking around the studio, and I was really engaged in just the simplicity of the piece and this stereoscopic vintage view of Niagara Falls wound up sitting on it, and I thought, I think I can incorporate this. So I did, and mounted it with fabric, and then added this Chinese frame carved frame. The frame doesn't have any cultural significance aside from the beauty of it. I added this screen behind the frame to create a quality of a caged landscape, and it speaks for me to the screen and frame of virtual reality and the removal of ourselves from the physical, sensual experience of land, water, wind, and all that experience and relationship entails. And the kind of extinction because of population and the way the natural world is being displaced by population. These are plum canes, so they were added just really to finish the work out, give it some breadth. And then the red thread kind of runs throughout the work, as you'll see, or some form of red.
Yeah, I've seen your work evolve, and through many years there's often been this beautiful, but subtle, dark blood red element, either in string or stitching or paint. Tell us a little bit of what does that red mean to you, Glenn?
So I had heard this, many years ago I heard this concept of red is witnessed in the prismatic spectrum of light. It's only suggested at the edge, at either edge, and it doesn't come into full form until it's in a material form. So that concept always interested me, and hence the red. Plus, a lot of the work is black and white, so red acts as a significant aesthetic accent.
Well, some of the visitors who've come in have wondered if it was life force or chi or energy or blood, something that we all have. This red runs through all of human life and our organism as humans. So I always encourage them to think whatever they want to think about.
Well, and I think that's a good take. I'd go with that take also.
Yeah, but it's so subtle, it's so elegant, but you don't miss it, and I love the red. When I think about if you didn't have the red in your pieces, they would be a little less vital.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
I'm so glad you started to do that.
Yeah, it's you want to be sparing with it, right? But it definitely brings life to the work, really, as you said.
So here we are in front of this glorious grand piece called A Distal Object. Glenn, tell us a little bit, what does distal mean for the folks who are watching, and how did you put this piece together?
A distal object is an object of stimuli relative to human perception. So there's proximal and distal stimulus. And distal is the object. Proximal is the way we interpret that object sensory-wise. This piece is assembled essentially in parts. So these are panels, 4 panels, and then a 5th panel. And everything comes apart. It's designed to be transported and stored as simply as possible and then assembled to create a larger work.
And I'm noticing this incredible detail here. So you just told me there were probably 1,000 little dash marks, 1,000 hand-painted lines there.
Yeah, it's similar to stitching, which is actually echoed in this form here. This is actual stitching with thread, and it refers to frequency, as does this oscillation, which is this is a sheen shift in the finish varnish that's on the piece that creates that oscillation.
A sheen shift. So tell us about this portion of the piece and these objects on the white panel.
Yeah, so the objects are, I got this medical device. It's a body brace from the mid-50s in that era. And I was attracted to just the building of it, how it was crafted. I did some stitching on it and some pigment work to create an oscillation on it. It's descriptive of emotional state and a rational state of human beings. And the fish trap is this lens of perception. Mm. The shape of the panel is a wedge with the thin edge at the top and the thick edge at the bottom, and the handle indicates the potential to spin the circle in an opposing concentric motion relative to the panel pieces over to the right.
Oh, I see that now. Just a few details I noticed. At home, I don't know if you'll be able to see it. There's a beautiful dark blood red edge on that, painted on the side of that wedge that I love. And Glenn hand-stitched these little marks on this thick leather. That's quite a task.
Yeah, it was.
Well, it's just so beautiful and powerful. That blue is spectacular. It really draws us in. I know that when we had visitors in here initially, they went right to this center, and then I would see them moving back to take it all in. Yeah, it's just glorious.
Well, thank you.
And let's look at another piece now. So this piece is called Compelled to Shimmer, a ring toss. And tell us a little bit about it, Glenn.
Okay. Well, it's virtually all found objects, including the depot bench. The only thing that I added to it was this canvas book that's supporting this print. The print's a vintage print of these dogs taking down a stag, and it's from the 1800s. Mm. The mirror is an old mirror also that I found, and essentially what it's saying is it speaks to competition and vanity or ego, and the struggle for fame and celebrity, and what a game of chance that is. Are we in that pursuit? Do we find contentment and balance? Question mark.
Yeah, the great mystery. For me, my first thoughts about it were about anticipation, waiting on the bench, waiting for the train to come, and also introspection. That's what the mirror means to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I look in it, I'm checking out what's inside myself. What are my interior thoughts? Mm-hmm. No, it's just beautiful. Where did you find that old wrecked metal sheet?
Oh, so I think I found that at a friend's yard. It was buried. Hence all the folds on it. It had been kind of folded up. And actually, I had brought him this cutout here. I had brought him a piece of it when he was in hospice, and so I couldn't find the piece to replace it. So I replaced it with some wire, hardware wire, and then backed it with ash. So there's a bit of a memory of him in it.
Oh, it's really beautiful, and I love how the old and discarded becomes beautiful again. Has a rebirth, a renaissance. Your pieces that you find other people consider trash, you're able to see the beauty in them.
Yeah, and I would hope in their best moments that when people look at it, they have a similar kind of reflection.
And it's an interactive piece too, because on the label here, there's a QR code. If a visitor scans that with their smartphone, they can hear beautiful chanting music. It's very haunting and spiritual sounding.
Yeah, it has a It has a quality that actually relates to, I think, to the print. There's this kind of echoing, like you're in the mountains, and it is, like you said, a haunting piece.
It is, and it's, when I have it on, it's nice for the whole, it seems to relate to the whole exhibit. So it's a really a nice aspect of the piece. It's not only visual, it's auditory. So this beautiful piece is Carbon Shadows, the audition.
That's right.
And we'll just let us tell you the stories behind this.
Yeah, so the small Sumi paintings I did a few years back, probably 7 years ago, and they've sat around, this being the only framed piece, formally framed piece. And then the Japanese chairs came out of an old cultural center in San Juan Bautista, and I was able to get those. So they kept winding up on the wall, the chairs in my studio, and so then they became frames for the Sumi paintings that I had done. And then this rigging all of a sudden spoke about kind of binding this formally framed piece, hence the audition. So for me, the chairs and the paintings symbolize, the paintings are figures in the chairs viewing an audition of celebrity and fame. Again, this speaks to ego and success of or not of celebrity, the suspension. And it drops into what is the ultimate, reality, which is transformation in cycle and ash.
You had mentioned, so these, this cultural center, these chairs were about 1936, so that's just before that awful period in our history where Japanese American citizens were interned in prison camps during World War II. So for me, that just makes it extra poignant and a little bit painful to think about children or families sitting in these chairs, which you think the chairs are actually made in Japan.
Yeah, they're Japanese folding chairs. I'm sure of that. Whether the writing signifies a school in Japan or the United States, I'm not sure.
But it's the name of a school.
That's what I've been told.
The Japanese characters. Oh, just beautiful. It's a particular favorite of mine. Thinking about how brave and beautiful our Japanese American neighbors always have been throughout history.
And this bowl, this is actually an agricultural tilling dish off a tractor that was given to me. It's lined on the outside with red felt because it had rotted. And then during the installation of the show, after putting the carbon underneath it and creating the carbon shadow, I rubbed pigment around the edge of the tilling disc. And I had pigment all over my hands. Wasn't sure what I was going to do with that. It led to another piece.
So there's a wonderful piece that we need to look up to see in this high corner of the gallery. And has quite an attachment to stories that you have shared.
Yeah, this piece is called Tear for Eva, a hand for Anna. And it refers to two mid-century artists, Eva Hesse and Anna Mendieta, both exiles as children from authoritarian regimes, Nazi Germany and Castro's Cuba. And they wound up in the United States. There was a difference in their age, but they both had a very short and illustrious career, ending in their mid-30s with their deaths. The main thrust of this, the teardrop shape, is cement in a nylon stocking that had come off a project that I had been working on. And I had several of them. and it wound up inside, coming through that box and being suspended off the wall. That hence the tear for Ava, because that was a very iconic shape she used in her sculptural works. When I was working on the show here, the install, I had red pigment on my hands from the carbon shadow audition piece, and I didn't know where to wipe it, and I looked, and I had a ladder set up, so I went up to this piece and put this red pigment mark on the piece. So it changed the work from a tear for Ava to a hand for Anna. Anna Mendieta died from falling out of a building, so there was it was very serendipitous, the creation of this work and the connection of the two artists that I wasn't putting together consciously, but upon reflection I saw a very strong connection.
Yeah, almost like a hand slipping off a ledge.
Yeah, or a hand reaching. You know, that it does look like a hand slipping, but it's also referring to how about a hand for Anna, you know.
So beautiful. If only they could know what you had done for them. Both incredible artists, both lives cut short in their mid-30s. It makes me sad. I think about what they would have produced had they lived to a natural old age.
Yeah, they were prominent in their times and you know, ahead of their times in their vision and use of material, dog artists.
You know, it's the smallest piece in this exhibit, but it's one of the most powerful and potent, I think. And I'm glad you just included it.
Yeah, it makes up in its kind of form and story in its size, right, relative to the larger works.
Yeah, it holds its own.
Plus installing it at a height like that, I think, you know, it's unusual, and it kind of lends more credibility to its size since it's further away. Let me tell you about this piece. This is titled Mutual Arising, Siddhartha, Homage to Hermann Hesse. And it speaks to the novel by Hermann Hesse called Siddhartha. Siddhartha, the novel briefly, is about two devotees of Buddha who follow Buddha to acquire enlightenment. And they diverge early on in their paths and re-meet in their old age. And one is still seeking enlightenment, and the other has found enlightenment. Siddhartha found enlightenment through taking a very diverse path to becoming a ferryman on a river, hence the mirror and the reflection of green. That refers to the mirror. His partner had followed Buddha his whole life and still hadn't achieved enlightenment. And he was asking Siddhartha at the end of their lives about the river. And Siddhartha was saying that you have to let go of your knowledge, bury the teacher. That's an icon of Buddha encapsulated in charcoal, and look into the river. It was very simple, and he had learned that from the ferryman that he took the ferry over from. The tree itself on the wall, it refers to Buddha and the Bodhi tree and his enlightenment.
But that's a slab of redwood?
It's a slab of redwood, yeah, that I bleached and whitewashed several times with transparent white.
Yeah, Glenn always has an interesting story, interesting history in layers below what you see on the surface of his work. Glenn, do you want to show us the lid of that box? Because it's such a great piece. Where's that from?
Yeah, so this was I'm not specifically clear on where it went, but it's an expedition case that passed through Stanford at some point. I acquired it at a flea market, and it kind of spoke to me about this whole piece. This piece evolved, rather serendipity way over several years. The writing back here is Sanskrit and it's Siddhartha.
Siddhartha.
Yeah. And then the spiral on the seat face just refers to the eternal cycle.
Beautiful.
Yes, so this piece is called Will You Remember Everything Everywhere? And it's a homage to Aldous Huxley, who was, again, mid-century 50s. He wrote a book called The Doors of Perception. And it's a small treatise on his self-examination and experience with mescaline that he recorded. A very fascinating small read. Within that book, he talked about remembering everything everywhere. And I had come up with this idea of remembering everything everywhere just a couple of months prior to seeing this book. So there was a real connect with that.
And Aldous also is more famous for writing A Brave New World.
That's right.
Yeah,
among other things.
So he refers to seeing everything everywhere when he's on mescaline?
You have to read, I can't remember.
Okay.
I can't remember everything everywhere.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you put it together, how you made it.
So I don't remember the exact sequence of how it came together. Actually, this canvas coated aluminum, I did the background, and then did the sequence of Sumi ink transparencies and applied them to the surface. And it kind of spoke about this concept that I had of will you remember everything everywhere, hence the threads coming through and then going to this root system underneath, dropping into this drawer that's carrying essentially the student's chair and knowledge, which is very fragile because the chair now the stool is coated with glass, so not something you really want to sit on. And the shroud was just it essentially was just an aesthetic decision to put a piece of music wire underneath this extra piece of cheesecloth that I had hanging off of it, which is on the background, the foreground of the canvas, the background of the Sumi.
I love that part of it. I love that it adds dimension to the piece, but also for me it adds a bit of a figurative element. There's a head and a body here. And the thought I had, so if the student's seat can't be sat upon, perhaps a good student, in order to learn, we don't need to be sitting. Yeah, it's beautiful too, the branches that become veins and arteries and tree and water and hair and everything. Yeah, beautiful. That's a really powerful piece.
Thanks. Yeah, it's actually in consort with another piece, there's a companion piece, not in the show, called Will You Remember Being Born, which speaks to memory.